Hello, folks. As always, welcome to Cook by the Books. My name is Stellan Harris. I am joined, as usual, by the lovely Amanda Showers. Say hello, Amanda.
Hello.
And we are here to bring you an episode on fall pasta. It is the fall season. The leaves are changing. It should be getting colder. We'll see. But as the season turns, I wanted to pick a recipe that would help highlight an ingredient that sort of symbolizes the season. So I decided we would go with some pasta. Switch over to my presentation. Can't get started. There we are. Beautiful. So we are, of course, to Cook My Book, the fabulous fall pasta edition. Cooked by the Books is, as usual, a DPRL culinary program. Today we are going to do a bit of pasta making. It's something that some folks have anxiety towards. It's not something most folks do. It's much easier just to go to the store, grab a box of pasta, bing bang boom, you're done. But I wanted to highlight some squash and also highlight my favorite ingredients, which is brown butter. Love brown butter. It's great. We'll get into it. Don't worry. But tonight we are going to make some squash gnocchi. I'll go into that a bit more, but this is an easy, fresh pasta that you can get into that isn't too hard, doesn't require a lot of special stuff, but I'm getting ahead of myself because I hear you saying, making pasta, that sounds hard. Have you ever made pasta?
No, that sounds hard.
It sounds hard, but I promise, it's not as hard as it sounds. And even better, I don't need any of this stuff. Because I got the pasta roller here. I don't have one of these. I spoke with someone on staff who did. Like, do you want this? And I'm like, no, because not everyone at home's gonna have one. And I want this to be for you folks. So it is useful and it's as useful as possible for you. But as I say here, making pasta shouldn't be hard. It can be a bit more involved if you want it to be. If you want to hit like the old rustic shapes, like you want to shape a fusilli noodle just so, there'll probably be some special stuff. But just making pasta doesn't have to be hard. You don't need to do anything fancy. And tonight we're gonna do relatively little, but get an end product that is pretty fancy. And do you know why that is, Amanda?
You know why?
Because we're making gnocchi. So gnocchi, for the unfamiliar, is an Italian pasta / dumpling that are perfect entryway to making fresh pasta at home. Traditionally, gnocchi made with potatoes, but tonight we're going to use some squash instead. They also made with ricotta and some other things. But the process, while we're getting a bit of time, is pretty straightforward. And the gnocchi cook quickly, and they can be used in many different dishes. Now about the brown butter. Amanda, have you used brown butter before?
I have a couple times.
How would you describe brown butter? Stressful?
Stressful.
Yeah.
Especially the first few times.
The first few times, yes. The first few times are always the worst. But for those who aren't familiar, brown butter is simply butter that's been heated until nearly all the water has been evaporated. So you only got butter, fat, and milk solids. And then keep going a bit further past that to get those milk solids to caramelize. Turn a nice golden brown. They impart a delicious nutty flavor. It's amazing. I use brown butter in all kinds of stuff. You can use it in your baked goods, your sauces. You can spread it on sandwiches as well to add a bit of a nutty note. You can make grilled cheese with it. That's good stuff. But yeah, it's legitimately amazing. But brown butter is going to be a bit intimidating. So that's why I'm going to give you some brown butter tips. Because like I said, it's hard the first few times, but if you know what to look for and if you take it nice and slow, it doesn't have to be a super stressful thing. What are we making tonight though? I heard fast. Tonight we're going to make some gnocchi with a sage and brown butter sauce. Now, I've put the ingredients here in front of you, and you'll note there are about 10 ingredients total. This is a very simple pasta. You can get more involved with gnocchi. Like I mentioned, some recipes use a combination of squash and pasta. Some use different cheeses. You can use like a pecorino if you wanted to. There are different ways to sort of adjust this, but for this, I just wanted a very simple, straightforward kind of recipe. Except for nutmeg. Nutmeg's on there. It's a little weird, but it's the season, and the recipe called for it. I think it's fun. Just go pick a little bit of nutmeg. You don't need the super fresh stuff. The stuff in the little shaker. And the sauce, as you can see, is just butter, sage, nuts, and some seasoning. And the nuts you can use whatever you want. I'm gonna use almonds. I've seen walnuts work well. I'm sure your nut of choice is one that it toasts nicely will work totally fine. But before the sauce, to make the gnocchi. The gnocchi is very simple. You'll mix together your squash, cheese, eggs, flour, nutmeg, and salt in a bowl until the dough just comes together. It can be kind of sticky. You can add a little flour to make it more manageable, but you don't add too much. After that, you'll transfer it to a floured surface and gently knead it. I know the kneading is another part that folks stress about. Don't worry. The gnocchi don't need to be kneaded for too terribly long. It just needs to come together and look a bit smooth. You can add flour as needed there until it just starts to get smooth and come together, then you can stop. After that, wrap in plastic, chill for a couple hours or overnight. Then you'll divide it out, roll it into some long ropes, cut them off, cut the gnocchi into 3/4 inch pieces. Could be bigger, could be smaller, up to you. Then you'll boil those for 3 to 5 minutes until some of them start to float, and you're done. And after that, the brown butter sauce is quite literally, you're gonna put your butter in the pan on medium heat, stirring to get it smoked. Once it turns golden, you're done. You'll add the nuts and toast for about 2 minutes, then the sage, then your gnocchi, get them a little bit heated through. Maybe get a little color on them, but you don't want to burn that butter, so be careful. And then you'll season and you'll eat. That's it. We'll go ahead and knock this recipe out in no time. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So here in front of me, I have my flour, my squash. I'm using canned pumpkin. Originally, I was going to use butternut squash, but I did some research and some tests, and the product ended up being about the same. And buying a can of pumpkin is much easier than roasting a butternut squash and pureeing it and cooking out the liquid so it's a thick consistency. And so I wanted to make this more approachable version. If you want to do the more extensive, the A+ version, the extra mile, go right ahead. Just roast a butternut squash until tender, puree it, cook it a bit until it becomes a thick consistency, then you're done. But I'm not doing that tonight, just for time reasons. So as I said, I have my canned pumpkin, my cheese, my flour in there. I'm gonna add 1 egg into it. And then I'm also gonna add an egg yolk. Amanda, how do you separate your egg yolks?
Shell.
In the shell. I like the shell trick. The shell trick is apparently a little bit controversial.
Is it?
Yeah, I've seen some folks say that you shouldn't do the shell trick. That using the hand is better. I don't know that to be true, but someone needs a shell for now. No, that's all the ingredients for our pasta. I'm gonna grab my wooden spoon. That's right, I brought my old wooden spoon, like an old Italian grandmother. It'll be great. So I'm just gonna mix this together just until it starts to come together. Those eggs and the pumpkin will add some moisture. That's where most of the moisture is coming from. And don't worry, it can look like nothing's happening, and then all of a sudden, all the dough is going to come together. It'll be incredibly sticky, but that's okay. Like that. It's very sticky dough, but that's okay. Because now that we put that together, I will show you folks. That's right, folks. Here on Cook with the Books, we have a special treat to help show a little bit easier. I've got some equipment that should help. I'm going to share that with you right now. I know, super excited, but hello. That's right, we have a movable camera now, and so I'm going to show you what this dough is looking like. This is pasta dough. As I mentioned, it's a little bit shaggy still, so we're going to want to add some flour to it, and we're going to mix it. I'll knead it a bit, but I wanted to give you an idea of what this looks like at this point in the process. I know doughs give a lot of folks anxiety, so I want to just cut out that middleman. But I'm going to get this out of here and get to the kneading. Back to main camera. Oh. The high tech, the production values on Cooking by the Books. So I have my cutting board here just as a work surface. You can use it on your countertop. It doesn't truly matter. What does matter is flouring your work surface. Because as I mentioned, this dough is going to stick. It's going to eat up all this flour, more than likely. So I've got a little cup here that's flour for rolling. I'm using about a half cup. I doubt I'll need all of this because we're just going to knead it until it comes together. So what I'm going to do now is take all that good dough off my wooden spoon. Bring it together with the big mass of dough. It's a kneading. Amanda, are you aware of what the proper technique of kneading is?
No, I am not.
I'm not either, but one thing I've been told is that it's pretty simple. I did some looking into this, and basically, all you're gonna do is bring it together and push it down. So I'm gathering it up with my fingers, pushing down with the heel of my hand. This is what I see people in the fancy cooking YouTubers do. So we're just kneading this together. You don't need to knead too long. If some of it sticks to the board, add a bit more flour, and some of it will stick, that's okay. As I mentioned, it's eating up all this flour. If it gets too sticky, you work again, add a bit more flour. But we don't need to knead this too much because it's already coming smooth. That was barely any. Now, look at this. Smooth, firm, done. That's your gnocchi dough. That's gonna make about 4 big servings. So what we would do in normal times, I'll put that in there, is that we would chill this overnight, or at least 4 hours. But because cooking by the boats is such a fancy production now, we already have a dough made. That's right. I made this dough this morning. Chilling in some plastic. And when I turn it out, oh, there we go. Again, so flour it up a bit. While in that bag, got a little bit sticky again. That's okay. Just on some flour. We don't need to do any more kneading. I'm just making sure everything's nice and floured. Because now I'm going to divide up the dough. And if the dough isn't too sticky while I'm doing that, that'll make my lives a lot easier. So that's our dough. Time to divide. Grab my knife. I'm going to divide this into, we'll say 4. Recipe calls for 8, but I'll do 4 just with big servings. Go make sure that the cut sides aren't against each other because they will just come back together. And you don't want that. You want your gnocchi to be pretty separate. It's going to be the same thing when you're actually shaping the gnocchi themselves. But so this is our dough, divided into 4 little portions. And then what we do is, like you did in kindergarten, the Play-Doh. Make a little snake on these portions over here. Still on my flour work surface, I'm going to roll it, get a little bit of flour, just roll it out. It's going to eat up this flour a little bit. It's going to spring back at you. Don't worry too much. This is a very forgiving dough. You just don't want to beat it up too much. There. So I've got my rope of dough, got my knife. We're just going to, oh, that's our first unit. One thing I will recommend is as you cut, make sure to kick it away with a knife. Because if you don't, you'll get a big long string of like half connected gnocchi, and that just makes your life a lot harder. So cut, kick, cut, kick. Confident, you can do it pretty fast. Just watch your fingers. Done.
How big would you say the pieces you're making are?
These are, I'd say, about 3/4 inch. And these are pretty big. You could go smaller. It really depends on what you're going for. These are our first batch of gnocchi, our first serving of gnocchi. Now, Amanda, are you familiar with gnocchi shapes?
I know they have ridges
Yes.
sometimes.
So it is contentious whether you should ridge them or not. There are traditional Italian grandmothers who are like, of course you ridge them. You get out the wooden gnocchi board, you roll them. For the more modern person, you use back of a fork. I'd say you don't need to. Again, in effect, I will for a couple of these just to show. So the way this works, take your gnocchi, take your fork. You're just going to roll it on the back of that fork. So without some ridges on it. Depending on the size of your yolk, it might have a little bit extra on the sides. It's okay. This is handmade pasta, homemade pasta. It may not come out looking perfect, but it'll still be delicious. Last one. Beautiful. Beautiful. So That's our first batch of gnocchi. Now what we need to do is drop them in some water. I have a pot of water boiling real quick. I'm gonna wash my hands very quickly because my hands are all dough. But don't you worry, folks, I'll be right back. Food safety, always wash your hands. And just like that, bing, bang, boom, hands are clean. We love clean hands. So I've got my water going here. I'm gonna give that just a second to boil. As we give it that second, I want to talk a bit more about what comes next. We've got our gnocchi, everything's good there. But there's the other half of this equation, it's our sauce. Now again, brown butter is intimidating. You are very intentionally getting close to burning something. And while butter isn't the most expensive thing, you don't want to waste that. You want your butter to be good. And so being aware of the margin between browned butter and burned butter is important. There is a surprisingly, shockingly close line at some ends of the brown butter spectrum. If you want to get a deep, dark, roasty, nutty, toasty flavor, you can get pretty close to burning your butter. And I want to help you avoid that. So some tips I would recommend is if you have like a stainless steel or a lighter colored saucepan, or like skillet as well, that's what I recommend using because that will let you see the individual milk solids a lot better. You can see them in a dark clay pan too, but it's definitely easier to notice when the butter starts to change color. Another thing that you'll notice as your butter starts to hit brown is the smell will change. It will become kind of nutty as it dries off that water and those solids with the toast, then it'll noticeably change in fragrance. Now, Amanda,
Yes.
are you familiar with the other product made by this, maybe the similar process?
I'm not sure.
Clarified butter?
Okay. Yeah.
Clarified butter is made this way. Ghee is made this way. Ghee is made by doing basically this, but you don't toast the milk solids. You filter them out with some spices. But don't worry, folks. I have one more gift for you. This is a visual chart. I got this from a cooking blog. Shout out. This is the color reference that you're looking for. We have clarified butter on the right and burned butter on the left. And you want to be right in all those, that nice golden color. Now, if it comes a bit light, just look at some more. You just don't want to get it too dark. That burned butter is a bad flavor. I can tell you from firsthand experience. But our water's come up to temp. So I'm gonna grab my gnocchi and just pop them in. Amanda, would you set a 3-minute timer for me? That's how long these gnocchi are gonna take. And folks, I'm just dropping these little guys right in there. I didn't shape all of them. You could. It's really largely up to you. So, and don't forget our shape that went up. Gnocchi overboard. But the great part about these gnocchi is that, as I mentioned before, they will float when they're done. I'll wait for that one. Roll up this other snake. I've called snakes. And one thing, small diatribe close. In the recipe, I called them ropes. As a child, though, with Play-Doh, they were snakes.
Absolutely.
But I didn't want to say roll out your snakes of dough to make gnocchi. That's some kind of mixed metaphor that I'm not really about. But you guys get what I'm saying. We just want it long and thin, one piece. And then kick, chop and kick, chop and kick. Like I said, we'll make sure that they don't stick together because it'll be a heck of a time getting apart. Other thing I like to mention about gnocchi, the gnocchi, like other dumplings and dishes like these, freeze extremely well. If I wanted to freeze these, I would put them on a sheet tray, and put them in my freezer until they're rock hard, and just go in a plastic bag. One thing you don't want to do, which is what I did the first time, which is put them all when they're still kind of soft in a bag, because then you get a big frozen ball of dough. That does not separate nice and cleanly into your beautiful gnocchi. That is what will not happen.
Is the cook time different when they're frozen, or is it still just until they float?
Just to float, might add, like, they cook so quickly, you might add like a minute or two, but still within that 3 to 5, 30 to 6 minute mark, you'll know when they're done. They're pretty good about that kind of thing. Give our gnocchi a stir. Oh, one thing you'll notice, I didn't salt the water. This is more learned experience from me to you folks. In the test batches, I heavily salted my water, like I would with normal pasta. And the gnocchi were inedibly salty. I could not eat them, they were that salty. And I might have oversalted, but that's not something I normally have to worry about with boxed pasta. It is something you have to worry about with fresh pasta. Fresh pasta will absorb salt a lot more easily than other pastas will. Amanda, how long is that timer?
About done, 15 seconds.
And they just started floating. So I'm gonna take them now. Those little guys are done. Beautiful little yolks. Put them in a little container here. Oh, and there's the alarm. Did I tell you or did I tell you, folks? All right. So I'll go ahead and do this. We'll do this next batch too. Yeah, we got some time. So we have plenty of gnocchi. And again, it is as simple as chopping them in. Set another timer, Amanda.
Yep.
While this batch is going, I can go ahead and start getting our sauce prepared. Get all the accoutrement for our sauce. And another thing that might come up is, you had a question, Selma, what if some of them start floating before others? Should I take them out when they first start floating or when all of them are floating? The answer I will give you is that in general, once one starts floating, they're all close to done. You can certainly wait until they're all floating. That won't really hurt things, but you don't necessarily need to. All right, clean up as we go, folks. Spoon goes over here. We'll put our other dough on this cutting board. We're not gonna need our cutting board for the rest of the program. Goodbye, cutting board. You've served me well. Now we're going off to the skillet. So I am here a comically large skillet. My younger brother bought this for me. It is comically large. I think it is a full 12-inch skillet. You do not need a skillet this big. It is not necessary. But our gnocchi are going. So for the ingredients for our sauce, here, since we're doing 2 servings, it's about a half a stick of butter, give or take a tablespoon or 2. This is unsalted butter. Again, I don't want to introduce salt. I don't mean to. Be very intentional about your salt, people. Give folks an idea of what our gnocchi are looking like. Go back to camera 2. Can you tell I enjoy having camera 2? It's very fun. To camera 2. So this is what you look like they're starting to float. You can see these guys here are floating first. The other ones will start floating pretty soon. The water's getting all delicious and starchy. We'll take those out once they're done. Oh, there we go. That's what they look like. And there we are. But as I mentioned before, our sauce, very simple. What else is going to be? Half stick butter, sage, almonds, and some salt, and that's it. That's our sauce. If you wanted, you could try and add a little bit of this delicious starchy pasta water. You don't have to. The sauce won't be particularly thick, but because we added so many things with strong flavors, it'll be very flavorful. So, as I mentioned, how's the timer, Amanda?
5 seconds.
And they just started floating. It's like clockwork, folks. I'm telling you. Sometimes my times are a bit off or a bit guesstimation. Not in this case.
Spot on.
It is almost spot on. If you have decently boiling water, these will cook pretty quickly. But we are done with boiling water. Now, let's swap our pots onto our big, beautiful skillet. Our skillet out front. I'm just going to go in with our butter. Now, I have the heat on relatively high. That's because I'm browned by fair share of butter. I do not recommend you do this. If you're not familiar with browning butter, take it low and slow if you need to. If you need that experience of seeing what it looks like before you do it, don't worry about high heat. Get a nice medium, and go from there. If that heat's a little bit too high. No limits, we're still within it. So again, I'm just going to move this butter around until it starts to melt and then toast so deliciously. Put a bit of butter paper. Now I, of course, use sage. Sage is, as I've come to know, a classical combination with gnocchi. I don't particularly know why, but it tastes good. And one thing that I did not realize when I was first reading this, but is a definite bonus, is because we're using fresh sage instead of dried sage. I imagine you could use, but it doesn't get this bonus is that when you put the sage leaves in, because at that point all the butter fat is just there, and the water's gone, they will fry and become little crispy sage leaves. That is definitely something that you don't miss out on. So our butter's almost melted, it's fizzing away. At this stage, it's still pretty pale and milky. But in a matter of no time, it's gonna start. In fact, perfect time, camera 2.
It is.
I promise I'm not just finding excuses to use camera 2. This is a good point of reference for you. Camera 2. So this is what our butter is looking like. So, as I mentioned, just normal melted butter at this point. It's not going to immediately change, but as the heat goes, as that water cooks off, and as those solids begin to fry, the difference will become very appreciable. But as I mentioned, right now, still pretty yellow, still pretty golden, classic butter. Back to camera 1. Oh, there we go.
With brown butter, do you want to be moving it a lot or let it sit for a little bit?
So I've heard both. I like to be very present when I'm browning butter. Mostly because the times that I have burned butter is when I've been doing something else. It's a lot like making a dark roux, if you ever had, for like a stew or a gumbo. As I've been told, I've never made gumbo personally, but I have it on good authority that a gumbo roux, you want to get it dark, and just like brown butter, a dark roux and a burned roux, fine line.
Yeah.
When you're getting that deep, dark, chocolatey roux, you gotta watch it. Don't do anything else. Same with brown butter. So our butter's foaming up right now. As the heat hits it, all those milk solids are starting to toast. Not quite browning yet. Getting close. I can feel it. I can see it as it foams up here. That's when there we go. Seeing some toasted milk solids. Oh, give it just a little bit longer. It hasn't quite hit that gold. It's getting there though. Beautiful. All right. So now we've got doing this. So because this is almost done, I'm gonna start adding in some more things I want to cook. First, I'm going to add in our almonds. They can get nice and toasty. Another big recipe, you don't want to burn. Burn nuts, unpleasant. But
You can smell the difference you were talking about.
you can smell it now? It's that subtle nutty flavor, and that was before I added the almonds, I swear.
Yep.
But it's a noticeable change. It's a noticeable change in the smell of the butter. All right, Amanda, set me a three-minute timer.
Yep.
I'm not gonna give these 3 minutes. But I want to give the almonds a chance to toast. And soon enough, sage a chance. I'll lower my heat a bit now that we're hitting brown. It's becoming golden brown. I'll show you here in a second. Take it off the heat. Well, going a bit fast. It's all right. This is why you want to be careful. Pay attention. In fact, I'm going to keep it off the heat for a second. So I added my sage. Sage leaves. They hit that fat. Oh, this is also something that I'm just going to comment on. If this does become too hot for you, you can take it off the oven. It's not going to hurt it. It's not going to ruin things, I promise. In fact, if things are getting too dark too fast, you probably save yourself a lot of heartache by just taking it off the element. But sage leaves are getting nice and crispy. Butter is not cooking nearly as fast. The nuts are getting toasty. You don't want the nuts to get too much color, but you want them to get some color for sure. You want sage leaves. Don't want to lose any sage leaves in this economy. No, sage leaves, herbs in general, fresh herbs, not the cheapest thing, so you want to get what you pay for. All right. Do start heating a bit back to medium. What's time we're at, Amanda?
Still a minute and a half.
Beautiful. So the almonds have been cooking for about 2 minutes. I'm going to add in, break them up a little bit so it's not just one big gnocchi mass in the pan. But these gnocchi are going to help everything both cool down a little bit and by adding a little bit of water, it's going to help prevent that butter from burning a bit more. So gnocchi is in. I went in a bit early just because I didn't want things to burn. And that is the kind of thing that you just kind of have to eyeball. Again, them being in early, not going to hurt it too terribly much. In fact, at home with a more heating element, you probably won't have these issues. See, on our small stove here, it can be a little bit temperamental, we'll say. But what we shall do, I'm going to mix this about a bit. We'll show for one last time on camera too. And that's beautiful, beautiful gnocchi. Toast a bit. I'm going to leave these for a little while. I want to show you what that looks like. Beautiful toasted nuts. Beautiful. I'm not sure if you can see, but there are small kind of brown speckles on the gnocchi. If you can't, those are those caramelized milk solids. And that's exactly what you want. As I've added that heat back, we got that crackling sound. I'm going to toast these as long as I dare. If I can, I'd like to get a little bit of a toasted edge on these gnocchi, but we'll see if I dare. It would be a crime to get this far and burn something.
Yeah.
How do I know it's a crime? I've done it. I've stumbled at that touchdown line, guys. But as long as we're careful, keep things moving a little bit, don't let things burn. I think I'm going to cut the heat now. You can take these longer. If you add the gnocchi in earlier, you can get more of a caramelized sear to them. And with better heat control, you can probably do so as well. But for our purposes, this is a beautiful dish of gnocchi. So let's take a little container here. I'm just going to keep it longer, but no, you can't.
A dangerous game.
It's a dangerous game, like how far can I take them before they burn? But for you folks, because I want you to have a good example, I'm going to go ahead and get these in this little bowl. Can. Always good to have some nice containers to put your meals in. As I mentioned in our meal prep video, plug. But as I mentioned before, the sauce is not thick because it is mostly just butter, but it's going to give a bit of fat to this dish. It's going to be flavored from the sage and the almonds. Finish off here, cut the heat. That is a finished dish. I will approach camera one. Camera one's gonna be better quality than camera two. I still love camera two, but we're gonna get a little bit better look at that.
Very nice.
Very nice. All right, now comes the moment of truth, except one more thing you want to do. My big chunk of Parmesan. Got my grater. Amanda,
Yes,
say when.
that's good.
All right.
I'm a cheese fan.
Amanda is a cheese fan. This is just a little bit. We grab a pinch of salt. Because up till now, we haven't salted. And we definitely want some salt in this. And the cheese is going to add a little bit of salt, but a couple shakes of salt won't go in this. And one last mix up a little bit, incorporate. And that's done, Amanda. Would you do the honors?
I absolutely will.
I mean, how does this smell?
Great. It's very good.
Try and get a bit of everything. It's gonna be hot.
Great.
Great, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It
Cheese is a good chocolate.
is. I was skeptical at first, but I think adding that cheese at the end does help bring it together a little bit. It's gonna melt it with that gnocchi heat. It's gonna add that more salty kind of notes to it. Fine. There we go, folks. And that's a pretty easy pasta. We made pasta tonight.
We did.
It was super easy.
Or you did.
Well, we did. It's a team effort, man. It's a team effort. All right. Thank you very much, Amanda. And thank you, folks, for tuning in. I hope this has been educational for you. I tried to give as many tips like this because this is one of it's one of our projects that's probably more prone to failure than most. This one is a bit more advanced, particularly with the brown butter, but alternatively, if you didn't want to bother with the brown butter, the gnocchi are still delicious. Gnocchi come in all shapes and sizes and with all toppings. You could do a ragu. You could do a carbonara if you're super advanced. Any kind of sauce will work. They're delicious to some pasta, and I can't recommend you try this enough. But with all of that said, it is that time once again, folks. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you've enjoyed this program, that you learned some new tips and tricks for your kitchen. The recording of this will appear on the YouTube channel in the near future. And once again, as always, thank you for joining us. I'm happy that you folks are tuning in for a little bit. I hope you will try this. It is sincerely something I think that anyone can do. It doesn't require any fancy materials. It doesn't require any fancy techniques. It's quite literally mix it together, roll it out, cut it, and you have fresh, delicious pasta. And the recipe scales incredibly well. If you did make a double batch, divide it into 8. If you made a triple batch, keep going. You can make as many of these as you need, and they freeze beautifully. So that is all for us tonight. I will once again thank you for joining us. I hope that you guys have a wonderful weekend.